first thing director Leon Vance noticed about death was the silence. Not the peaceful kind people write about in poems or whisper about in hospital corridors. No, this silence was vast, like standing in the middle of an ocean at night with no wind, no waves, no horizon. Just stillness, absolute and unapologetic. He didn't remember the exact moment it happened. 1 second there had been chaos, shouting, footsteps, the sharp crack of gunfire echoing through steel walls, and the next, nothing. No pain, no fear, just quiet. And somehow he understood. Leon Vance was dead. He stood, if standing was even the right word, in a place that didn't feel like a place at all. No walls, no sky, no ground. Yet he felt steady, anchored, as if the weight he had carried for years, the burden of leadership, secrets, decisions that could never be undone, had finally been lifted. For the first time in decades, Leon Vance wasn't responsible for anyone, and strangely, he was okay with that. Back in the world he had left behind, the bullpen was anything but silent. McGee stared at the empty director's chair like it might suddenly fill itself. Torres paced in tight circles, his jaw clenched so hard it looked like it might crack. Knight stood still, arms folded, trying to hold herself together with sheer willpower. No one spoke, because saying it out loud would make it real. Director Vance was gone. If Vance could have seen them, he might have said something sharp, something grounding. Pull yourselves together. There's still work to do. That had always been his way. Not cold, never cold, but controlled, focused. He believed in moving forward because standing still meant letting grief win. And grief, in his line of work, was a luxury few could afford. But here, in the stillness beyond life, he allowed himself something he never had before. Reflection. He thought about Jackie, her smile, the way it could cut through even his worst days, the quiet strength she carried, even when danger hovered too close for comfort. Losing her had nearly broken him, not publicly. He never allowed that. But in the quiet hours, when the world slept and the weight of everything pressed down hardest, he had survived that loss. But it had changed him. Maybe that was the thing about Vance. He didn't shatter. He absorbed every loss, every sacrifice, every hard decision. It all became part of him, layer upon layer until the man beneath was almost impossible to see. But now there were no layers. Just him. He wondered about the choices he had made, the classified files, the operations no one else would ever know about, the times he had sent agents into danger knowing not all of them would come back. Those decisions had followed him like shadows. Necessary, he always told himself, for the greater good, for the safety of others. And he believed that. He still did. But belief didn't erase the cost. Out here, in the silence, he could finally admit that. And still, he didn't regret it. Because someone had to carry that weight. And he had chosen to be that someone. A flicker, like a ripple in the stillness, pulled his attention. Not a sound, not a sight, more like a feeling, connection. For a brief moment, he felt them. His team, their grief, their anger, their disbelief. It hit him like a wave, not overwhelming, but strong enough to remind him that his story hadn't ended in isolation. It had ended surrounded by people who cared, people who would carry on, and that mattered more than anything. Back at NCIS, McGee finally spoke. He wouldn't want us to stop. His voice was steady, but his eyes betrayed him. Torres stopped pacing. Yeah, he muttered. That sounds like him. Knight nodded slowly. Then we don't. It wasn't a grand speech. It wasn't dramatic. But it was enough. Because Vance had never been about grand gestures. He had been about action. In the quiet beyond life, Vance felt something shift. Not an ending. Not really. More like a transition. He realized then that death wasn't about disappearing. Not entirely. The work you did, the lives you touched, the people you shaped, they carried pieces of you forward. And in that sense, Leon Vance wasn't gone. Not completely. He thought about the legacy he was leaving behind. A stronger agency. A team that could stand on its own. Agents who had learned to trust their instincts, to rely on each other, to fight not just for justice, but for each other. That had been his goal all along. Not to be indispensable, but to make sure NCIS didn't need him. And now it didn't. That realization didn't sting. It brought peace. Not bad. He murmured into the endless quiet. For a man who had spent his life in control, accepting the unknown was the ultimate test. And he passed it the only way he knew how, with quiet resolve. If anyone had asked him, back when he was alive, how he wanted to go, he probably would have given a practical answer. Something efficient. Something that made sense. But now, looking back, he understood something deeper. It wasn't about how you died. It was about what you left behind. And Leon Vance had left behind something solid. Something lasting. Something good. The silence around him began to change. Not breaking, not shattering, but softening, like the first hint of dawn after a long night. He didn't know what came next. Didn't need to. For once, uncertainty didn't feel like a threat. It felt like freedom. Back in the bullpen, the team returned to work. Files were opened. Phones rang. Cases moved forward. Life continued. And somewhere in the rhythm of it all, in the quiet determination of every agent who stepped forward to do their job, there was a trace of him. A presence. A standard. A legacy. Leon Vance was dead, and that was okay with him. Because in the end, he had done what he set out to do. He had served. He had protected. He had led. And now, he could finally rest. Not as Director Vance. Not as the man burdened by impossible choices. But simply as Leon, at peace with the life he had lived and the future he had helped create. The silence didn't last forever. Leon Vance felt it before he understood it. A subtle shift, like a current beneath still water. The calm that had wrapped around him so completely began to move, to evolve. It wasn't unsettling. It wasn't urgent. It was inviting. For a man who had built his entire life on certainty, on facts and control and calculated outcomes, this should have bothered him. It didn't. Instead, he did something he rarely allowed himself to do in life. He let go. Back at NCIS, the air had changed. Not lighter. Not yet. But different. There was movement again. Purpose. A rhythm slowly reassembling itself after being shattered. The bullpen, once frozen in grief, now buzzed with quiet determination. McGee sat at his desk, fingers hovering over the keyboard. He wasn't typing yet. Just thinking. Remembering. Vance had never been the kind of director who hovered, but his presence had always been felt. A steady force in the background. The kind of leader who didn't need to raise his voice to command a room. Now that presence was gone. And somehow, McGee realized that meant it was their turn. He trusted us, McGee said quietly. Torres leaned against the desk beside him, arms crossed. Yeah, he replied. Didn't always show it the easy way, but yeah, he did. Night looked between them, her expression firm despite the sadness still lingering behind her eyes. Then we don't second-guess it now. It wasn't about replacing Vance. No one could. It was about honoring him. Elsewhere, beyond the limits of time and space, Vance felt something new. Not memory, not reflection, presence. At first, it was faint, a shape without form, a feeling without a name. But it grew stronger, more defined, until it became something he hadn't expected. Familiar. He didn't turn, because there was no direction to turn toward, but he knew. Jackie. The name wasn't spoken aloud, but it existed, clear and certain. And then she was there, not as a ghost, not as a shadow of who she had been, but whole, exactly as he remembered, and somehow even more. For the first time since her death, Leon Vance felt something crack through his carefully controlled composure. Emotion, raw and unfiltered. You took your time, she said, her voice carrying the same warmth he had held onto for so long. A faint smile tugged at his lips. Had a job to finish. She stepped closer, studying him in a way no one else ever could. You always did. There was no accusation in her tone, no regret, just understanding. Back in the real world, a case file landed on McGee's desk with a quiet thud. Got something, Torres said. Possible lead tied to the director's last operation. McGee looked up, his focus sharpening instantly. Then we follow it. Knight nodded. All the way. There it was again, that unspoken agreement. No hesitation. No fear. This was who they were now. Not just agents. Vance's agents. Do you regret it? Jackie's question lingered in the space between them. Vance considered it. All of it. The sacrifices. The long nights. The distance it had sometimes put between him and the people he loved. I regret the cost, he admitted. Jackie nodded gently. But not the choice. No, he said firmly. Never the choice. Because the choice had been about protecting others. About doing what needed to be done when no one else could, or would. And that had always mattered more than anything. She smiled, and it felt like something inside him finally settled into place. Then you're ready. For what? He asked. But deep down, he already knew. The bullpen was alive now. Phones rang. Agents moved with purpose. Conversations overlapped in controlled chaos. It wasn't the same as before. It never would be. But it wasn't broken. It was evolving. McGee stood, holding the case file in his hand. Let's go, he said. Torres grabbed his jacket. About time. Night followed, her expression steady. We finished this. As they moved toward the elevator, there was no grand moment. No dramatic pause. Just forward motion. Exactly the way Vance would have wanted it. Funny, Vance said, a hint of dry humor returning to his voice. I always thought I'd have more questions. Jackie tilted her head, and now, he looked into the vastness around them. Not empty anymore, but full of something he couldn't quite define. Now I think I'm okay not having all the answers. That was new. For Leon Vance, that was everything. The connection to the world he had left flickered one last time. He felt them again, his team, focused, determined, moving forward. And in that moment, he understood something with absolute clarity. They didn't need him anymore. And that wasn't a loss. It was a victory. Jackie reached for his hand. "Come on," she said softly. For years, he had carried the weight of command, the responsibility of every decision, the burden of every outcome. Now, for the first time, he set it down, completely. Leon Vance took her hand and stepped forward. Back at NCIS, the elevator doors closed. The team stood together inside, silent but united, ready, not just to solve the case, but to carry on a legacy. Leon Vance was gone, but his influence remained. In every decision, every action, every agent who chose to stand their ground and do what was right, no matter the cost. And somewhere beyond the noise of the world, beyond duty and sacrifice, beyond even death itself, he had finally found something he had spent a lifetime earning: peace. And this time, he didn't have to fight to keep it. There was no rush on the other side, no ticking clocks, no urgent calls, no crises demanding immediate decisions. For Leon Vance, that was the strangest part. For decades, his life had been measured in seconds, every choice carrying consequences, every hesitation potentially deadly. Now, time didn't press against him. It didn't demand anything at all. And yet, something still moved. Not outside. Inside. Still thinking like a director? Jackie's voice carried a quiet amusement as they walked, though walking didn't quite capture it. It felt more like drifting forward with purpose. Vance gave a small, knowing exhale. Hard habit to break. She smiled. You don't have to break it. Just don't let it define you anymore. That was easier said than done. For so long, Director Vance had been who he was, not just what he did. The line between the man and the mission had blurred until it was almost invisible. But now, stripped of the title, the responsibility, the constant weight of command, who was left? Back at NCIS, the case was unfolding fast. Security footage just came in. McGee said, eyes locked on his screen. Timestamp matches the night of the director's last op. Torres leaned in. Show me. The grainy video flickered to life, shadows moving, a vehicle pulling into frame, a figure stepping out. Knight's voice sharpened. Pause it there. McGee froze the image. The room went still. Is that? Torres started. It is, Knight confirmed. A connection, a lead, something tied directly to Vance's final moments. And suddenly, this wasn't just another case. This was personal. Vance felt it again, that pull. Stronger this time. Not enough to drag him back, but enough to remind him that the world he left behind was still turning, still fighting, still searching for answers. They're close, he said quietly. Jackie looked at him, understanding immediately. Your team. He nodded. A part of him, the part that had led, protected, commanded, wanted to go back. To guide them. To make sure they didn't miss anything, didn't walk into danger unprepared. But he didn't move, because he knew something now that he hadn't fully accepted before. They didn't need him to lead them anymore. They had learned. They were ready. Then let them do what you trained them to do, Jackie said gently. Vance met her gaze, then gave a slow, accepting nod. Yeah, he said. They will. The interrogation room felt tighter than usual. Torres sat across from the suspect, eyes sharp, posture coiled like a spring ready to snap. You were there, he said flatly. Night Director Vance died. The man smirked faintly. You got proof of that. Torres leaned forward. We don't need proof. Not yet. We just need time. Knight stood in the corner, arms crossed, watching every flicker of expression. McGee observed from behind the glass, analyzing, connecting dots in real time. They moved like a unit. Seamless, focused, unrelenting. And in the rhythm of it, the precision, the trust, the unspoken coordination, there was something unmistakable. Vance, you see that? Jackie's voice carried a quiet warmth. Vance didn't need to ask what she meant. I do. There was pride there. Not loud, not boastful, just steady and certain. They're better than I was, he admitted. Jackie raised an eyebrow. That surprises you. A faint smile crossed his face. No, he said. That was the goal. The suspect broke 43 minutes in. Not because of intimidation, not because of pressure, but because the team didn't let up. Piece by piece, they dismantled his story until there was nothing left to hide behind. It wasn't supposed to go down like that, he muttered, voice cracking. We were just supposed to scare him. Send a message. Torres' expression darkened. You don't scare a man like Vance. The suspect swallowed hard. Orders changed. Knight stepped forward. From who? A long pause. Then, he gave them a name. McGee stared at the board as the pieces clicked together. This goes higher than we thought, he said. Torres shook his head. Of course it does. Knight's gaze hardened. Then we take it all the way up. No hesitation. No doubt. Just resolve. Vance felt the shift the moment it happened. The truth surfacing. The path becoming clear. It settled something deep within him, something unfinished. Not unfinished anymore. They've got it, he said. Jackie squeezed his hand lightly. Of course they do. For a long moment, neither of them moved. There was no need, no urgency, no weight pressing down on what came next. Just a quiet understanding. I used to think this job was everything, Vance said. Jackie tilted her head slightly. And now? He looked at her, not as Director Vance, not as a man defined by duty, but simply as himself. Now I think it was part of everything, he said. An important part, but not the whole story. She smiled, something soft and knowing in her expression. Took you long enough. He let out a quiet breath, almost a laugh. Yeah, he admitted. It did. Back at NCIS, the team stood together once more. The case wasn't over. Not yet, but they were closer. Closer to justice. Closer to closure. And stronger than ever. McGee looked around at the team. We finished this, he said. Torres nodded. For Vance. Knight added quietly. For all of us. Beyond it all, in a place untouched by time or loss, Leon Vance took one last look. Not with his eyes, but with something deeper. Not at the details. Not at the case. But at the people. His people. Carrying forward everything he had stood for. Everything he had believed in. And doing it their way now. The right way. He turned away. Not out of indifference, but out of trust. Because the story he had been part of was still being written. It just didn't need him in the same way anymore. Ready? Jackie asked softly. This time, there was no hesitation. No lingering questions. No unfinished thoughts. Leon Vance nodded. Yeah, he said. And together, they stepped forward, beyond duty, beyond sacrifice, beyond the life he had known, into whatever came next. Leaving behind not an ending, but a legacy that would never fade.